Ребятки, всем привет. Продолжаем наши тусовочки. Сегодня мы будем углубляться в Next.js и начнем прохождение курса Intermediate Next.js с код Moss. Так, на прохождении на еще одном его курсе Introduction to Next.js 13 плюс V3 мы закончили его на прошлой тусовочке. Вот, в первой части мы обозревали, кто такой Скотт Мосс, что он делает, все его социальные сети и прочее. Вот. Смотрели, что он там делает. Ну, в плане его супер фильтр AI. Вот. Ну и сегодня мы будем более глубоко изучать идею Next.js. Тут более такие специфичные нюансы. Надеюсь, будет более интересный проект какой-нибудь, на примере которого нам покажет фишечки. Ну а для разогрева мы с вами порешаем задачку на коды vars. Немножечко тупизны и позора. Так. Сейчас я ребяткам разошлю нашу тусовочку. Сейчас я, ребят. Так. Готово. Ну что, стартуем, да? Так, идем. Practice. My language status approved. Progress. I have not completed. Difficulty 8Q. Quadrants. Это меня пугает. Mathematics. Ну давай. Given a point in Euclidean plane x and y, return the quadrant the point exists in 1, 2, 3 or 4 integer. Типа вот 1, 2, 3 or 4. X and y are non-zero integers, therefore the given point never lies on the axis. Так. There are 4 quadrants. First quadrant, the quadrant in the top right contains all points with positive x and y. Так. Second quadrant, the quadrant in the left top contains all points with negative x but positive y. Third quadrant in the top left, bottom left, contains all points with the negative x and y. Ну, четвертый, понятно. Так, И типа нужно определить, какой квадрант, да? Давай. Повели. А что такое повели? Это на каком-то языке, да, повели? Ну-ка. Типа стартуем. Кроатиан. Блять, первый раз такой язык знаю. Слышу. Так, ну, наверное. Ну, в тупую. Давай в тупую. Вот, if. X меньше нуля. И y меньше нуля. То return 3. Если x больше нуля, а y меньше нуля, то 4. Если x больше нуля, а y больше нуля, то это 1. Если y больше нуля, а x меньше нуля, то 2. Максимально тупо. А как еще можно сделать? Один, два, три, 4. Не знаю. Насрать. Submit. Давай посмотрим, как сделать, ребятки. Через тернарник. Это best practice считают. Это клевер, но это сарказм, наверное. Типа plain. Plain. А что такое plain? Ну, типа по Y, что ли? Типа вот это плюсы, а это типа минусы. Ну вот, Александр Коробка вот эти magic условия вывел в абстракции. И, в принципе, код стал осмысленным. Более осмысленным. Можно ли назвать это best practice? Best practice? Ну, на мой взгляд, избыточно, конечно. если мы ведем речь о таких базовых концепциях, как квадрант, что вот эти условия выделять в абстракцию, но тут названо неправильно. First quadrant — это значение. Это вот должно быть названо. А вот это условие должно быть названо is first quadrant. И при том квадрант можно было опустить. Например, is first, is second, is third. То есть, тут речь о том, что если мы создаем абстракции, нужно думать над их неймингом. 7 раз подумать, 1 раз назвать. Да? Потому что вот это имя избыточно и неправильно. Вводит в заблуждение. Смотришь на это имя, думаешь, что как будто здесь значение. Не boolean. А вот это. Через паттерн матчинг. Да. Вот. Вообще полная хуйня. As a newbie, I could have an approach. I could. Что означает I could have? Я могу иметь. Я мог бы иметь. I think the key is understanding this is know the math sign. Return an integer -1, 0 and positive. Then use this to calculate the proper index on the list. В индекс 0,5 if x is positive. Да, в пизду, даже вчитываться не хочу в эти объяснения. Но это тоже избыточное условие, потому что у нас в задаче даны эти ограничения на x и y. И в один поток все сделано, да? Else, if else. Тогда уж и вот это тоже избыточное. Ну и у меня тоже там было избыточное. Вот здесь, ладно. Че, уже достаточно. Ребят подождали, да? 15 минуточек. Давайте стартую IDE-шечки. Че, warp, да? Так, вот Next.js. У нас тут два репозитория. У меня обновился. А я его не просил. Давайте смотреть курс. Level up your Next.js skills to build production-ready applications. Dive into advanced concepts like server actions, routes loads, and data fetching strategies. Implement from authentication project routes with middleware and optimize performance through caching and revalidation techniques. Create a full stack application while exploring React 18+ features, database integration, and best practice for developing dynamic, responsive web apps. Best practice. Вот это ключевая идея, зачем мы фармим фронтенд мастерс. Мы насыщаемся лучшими практиками для промышленной кодовой базы, для ремесленничества. Так, ну, у Скотта Мосса здесь новая причесочка. Так, ну давайте сделаем обзор. Project Database Setup. React Standards in Next.js. Server Form Actions. Server Form Action Overview. Auth Actions. Submit Button. Sign In Form. Ну да, кстати, вот тут вот формы обрабатываются с помощью Server Actions. Вот эти вот, с помощью Form Actions. На мой взгляд, может, это специфика для Next.js, но, на мой взгляд, привычнее обычно от Submit. С прикрученной какой-нибудь библиотекой, hook form, например. Ну ладно, посмотрим. Дальше. Routing, data fetching, dashboard routes, default routes. Server-side data fetching. Да, вот таким он кинулся словом интересным. Это вот data fetching strategies. Вот интересно будет посмотреть, что такие data fetching стратегии. Что он имеет в виду под этим. Ну что, погнали. И еще минуточку. Давайте еще минуточку обозреваем. То есть, типа, мы можем на клиенте данные подтягивать, да, фетчить. Можем на сервер, да. Peer request caching. Ну все, тут закончились, да, стратегии вот здесь. Дата фетчинга. Пошли кэширование, оптимизации, да. Роутинг. Server actions и revalidation. Ну, не густо, но Погнали. Watch курс. Превью не будем смотреть, потому что, как правило, там нарезка из каких-то из этих видео, из уроков, не особо информативная, а просто демонстрирующая формат мероприятия. Че, погнали?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Intermediate Next.js. I am your instructor, Scott Moss. I've been fortunate enough to kind of been there in the early days when a lot of these frameworks were coming to fruition and worked with some of the teams that created these frameworks. So I've just been involved on the low level early on, and even now in my career, I'm still involved as much as I can. And then when it comes to Next.js, I've been there since day one. I love the Vercel team. I've been using them since they were called Now, and then Zeit, and then now Vercel. And Next.js has pretty much been my go-to framework before it was recommended on the React docs. So I'm kind of OG Next.js. And this course is just like a further extension on the...
Так, что такое OG? OG. Urban Dictionary. OG. Original Gangster. OG Next.js. Oh man, that was OG. What you did back here. OG used to mean original gangster. Although some people these days use OG as quicker way to saying original. Вот это да. Original Gangster. 90 gang-affiliated rappers called themselves Original Gangsters or OG for short. It's article. It's a title for real actual crime and gang-affiliated gangsters. While lots of black... Блять, ну естественно, black young men call themselves gangsters. A lot of them didn't commit any crime. The term of original gangsters is less common today, mostly because the limitations of lyric today. But original gangsters are still a thing. Wanna be? Oh, I'ma shoot your ass. Original gangsters, shut the fuck up. Ну, камон, ну, естественно, ожидаемо от нигера. OG. I'm OG Next.js. Yo. I'm a nigga bitch.
Intro course that I taught. If you haven't checked out that intro course and you're looking to get started with Next.js, highly recommend checking that one out first, because this one is expecting you just to know a little bit about Next.js. We do get into the weeds here a little bit. But if you have been paying attention to anything Next.js related, you know that they've had some major updates in the last year and a half on their side, but also because there were a lot of downstream changes from React. Even with the new React version 19 coming out, there's a bunch going on. So a combination of those things, the Vercel team decided to create some, somewhat controversial features, I would say. I mean, because they were just hugely breaking changes. But I think once you learn the patterns and you adopt them, you come to realize the beauty and why they made those changes and how you can take advantage of them. So in this course, I want to talk about that, right? There are a lot of unsaid patterns that I've learned from using Next.js in production for some time now that aren't in any docs. They're basically, some of them are my opinions and things like that, but a lot of them are just what the community have developed over time since some of these new features have come out. Let's walk through some of the resources of the course and kind of just get our bearings, and then we'll hop into it. So first things first is there's a repo here on my GitHub. My GitHub is this. It's named after my son, Hendrix, and the course is Intermediate Next.js. So fork and clone down that repo.
Давай. Где ссылочка была? Секундочку.
There's a repo here on my GitHub.
Вот, репа. Так, предлагается. Давай. Предлагается пароль сменить. Давай. Ну, давайте не будем сейчас этим заниматься. Отрегернула вот это вот. Всегда вот беспокоюсь, волнуюсь вот прямо. Когда вот вижу вот эти вот красный цвет, да, вот эти вот тревожные значки, что что-то опасное случилось. Негодяй. Так, давайте клонируем репозиторий. Я в чатик присылаю его. Запускаем warp. Git клон. Intermediate, да. Так, делаем покрупнее. npm i. Так, давай посмотрим на git graph. Александр Хрищук что-то сделал. Вот эти дрочеры, да, которые хотят законтрибьютить. I'm a фронтенд мастерс GitHub Scott Moss contributor. Так. А, вот по этим, наверное, коммитам мы будем продвигаться, да? Course link and instructions. Турса setup. Старт. Интересный нейминг коммитов, конечно. Ну, делаем поправку на OG Next.js, yo, motherfucker. Так. roadmap. Да. Обозреваем наш roadmap. Мы находимся React Learning Path. И сейчас прошли вот Introduction to Next.js. И сейчас делаем запятую в Next.js. Как React Framework. Тусимся с Котом Мосом на фронтенд мастерс. И вот углубляемся в Next.js. Да. Потом запилим AI Powered Full Stack Next.js App. А потом заценим Headless CMS Next.js как использовать контент-менеджер системы. Так, ну погнали.
My GitHub is this. It's named after my son, Hendrix, and the course is Intermediate Next.js. So fork and clone down that repo. In the README, you'll find a link to the course notes. So these are the notes that will be.
А что-то я не нашел. Смотрите, он перепилил, да, ритмишечку. Турсо аккаунт. А что за Турсо аккаунт? Что это? SQLite for Production. Это мы, видимо, будем настраивать базу данных таким образом, чтобы она на деплое взлетела у нас, да, на верселе. Потому что в прошлый раз, когда мы делали на Introduction Next.js, мы когда задеплоили, у нас, сейчас покажу, у нас запросы к базам данных не делались. О, deployments. Вот здесь. У нас, конечно, роутингом испорчено. Запросы к базе данных, поэтому здесь не продемонстрировать. Ну, в общем, не делаются запросы к базам данных, поэтому мы, видимо, вот решаем эту проблему с помощью вот этой штуки.
Following, I'm just going to hop into the section 0, talk about the intro here a little bit. Just a recap of what Next.js is. Again, I'm assuming you've at least built a hello world with Next.js, hopefully with the app directory. If you haven't built anything with the app directory, that's fine if you have experience with the pages directory, but I won't be doing like a tour of like, here's every single thing with the app directory. That's going to be in the intro course. So I walk through that thoroughly. I'll hold your hand and walk you through that. But this one is just assuming you've at least built something with the app directory. But I think if you do have extensive experience with the pages, you'll probably be fine here. Just ask questions along the way. So Next.js framework on top of a framework built by Vercel. It's basically, I like to describe it as like the Rails for React. It's just a bunch of opinions baked into React. And if you go to the React docs, as far as like getting started, it's the recommended framework. It's literally the #1 framework to use. I think it wasn't even that long ago where they recommended use create React app. And now I don't think they mentioned that anywhere. It's like at the bottom somewhere, it's like, oh, we also have this thing called CRA. Maybe if you want to check that out. But
CRH. что специфичное, наверное, для нигера.
But for the most part, it's really going to be Next.js. And just to see how far along they've come, like if you just go look on their website and look at who's using it, you have companies of all sizes. And like, I mean, OpenAI uses them for so much stuff. It's just incredible what they've been able to achieve with the framework in such a fragmented landscape when it comes to front-end JavaScript. So I'm still just impressed that they were able to do that. And, you know, I'm just a big fan of it. So here's some of the topics we're going to cover. It's just me just spitting out a random list of all the things that I know we're going to be talking about. So server actions and mutations. So if you've tried to use those, I know in my intro course, server actions and mutations, you had to like enable them because they were not enabled by default. And I think in that course I said, I don't use these. And it wasn't because it was like experimental. It was because I just couldn't find a good use case for them. I was like, why would I do this? I could just use a route handler. Okay, that is not the case anymore. I pretty much always use server actions and mutations.
Now you'll see why. Окей. Это как раз о том вопросе, которым я задавался в начале, когда мы обозревали содержание этого курса. Вот он обещает нам объяснить, почему нужно предпочитать server actions and mutations.
Now you'll see why. And rarely do I use the route handlers for a lot of things. We'll talk about form actions, which are really cool. Some special hooks that come with that. Transition hooks. Middleware, which is not really new to Next.js 13 plus, but it's very useful when you think about different environments like.
Ну, наверное, для них этот milestone 13+, Next.js 13+, потому что в 13-й версии перепилили, видимо, какие-то конвенции, связанные с тем, как там страница у них называется, как структура проекта, видимо, еще что-то такое. И поэтому это как бы такой milestone, типа Next.js до 13 версии и после 13 версии. И поэтому вот он говорит так, Next.js 13+.
Like Edge and things like that. How to do things like, you know, protecting your routes with authentication. It's way different. Server component data fetching, caching server components data, memoizing server-side data calls, caching revalidation, streaming in suspense, error handling, parallel routing, route matching, and a lot more. There really is just a lot in this course. This might be one of the most extensive courses I've taught, so it's going to be a lot packed into this one. So if you're looking for a wide net of covering things, this is the course. We already talked about the prerequisites. You know JavaScript, you know React, you built some things in Next.js. As far as the format, it's pretty much similar to how I teach most of my courses. I'll introduce a concept, I'll talk about it. Most of it will be in the notes. I typically just, you know, I kind of want to make sure I'm saying the same thing that the creators are saying, but in my own words. So most of those lecture notes are just like my interpretation, what the docs are saying, and then from my experience. But for the most case, a lot of that information is going to be on the docs. And then I kind of walk through that interpretation of like, yeah, this is what this means. Here's some gotcha, stuff like that. And then we apply that to something practical. And then we just do that on repeat until we finish the app, until we finish the things we want to talk about. Yeah, before we get into the course setup, let me show you what you're going to be building so you know what's happening. So we're going to be building an event app where you can like make events and, you know, have attendees RSVP and things like that.
RSVP. Initialism derived from the French phrases. Répondez, s'il vous plaît. Please respond. Ну, типа опросничек, да?
It's called Party with a D. So that's what we're going to be building. Right now, here's the sign-in form. We need to figure out, you know, a couple things to enable this. So I'm just going to sign in with an account.
Чем он пользуется? Арком? Что такое арк? Арк браузер. Что это за Arc браузер такой? Почему он его использует? It's a Chrome replacement I've been waiting for. The Verge. Кто такой Verge? Full of big new ideas about how we should interact with the web and is right about most of them. А что за ID? А что за ID-то? Что за идея? Так. Arc wants to be a web's operating system. So it built a bunch of tools that make it easier to control apps and content. Turn tabs and bookmarks into something more like app launcher. And build a few platform-wide apps of its own. Treats the web the way TikTok treats video. Ну, что-то выглядит каким-то задроченным. Не совсем понятно, зачем. А вообще, кто такой вот этот The Verge? Ощущение, что это какой-то этот альтуха какая-то. Со своим вот этим вот дизайном. Странным.
Good morning, good morning. For years, we've been pursuing our vision of a mobile AI assistant.
А, вот это кто. Это, короче, a team of journalists that examines how technology will change life in the future. Supervised director, вот этот, Веран Павик, senior producer Бека Форсейк, Special Pro Виктория. Ну давай. Посмотрим на чувака. Вот этот чувак, да? Ну, типа, они обозревают новые всякие технологии обозревают. Ну, это типа авторитет, которым бравирует Arc. Это типа more details, это типа сперматозоид, да, у них. Ну, какая-то хипстерская поебень. Вот. Ощущение такое сходу. Ладно, поюзаем.
That I think I have already. Let me see. Cool. Yeah, here we go. So you get to this dashboard. This dashboard is just like a combination of a bunch of stuff. It kind of shows you your current RSVPs that you have, the latest events that you created and what their statuses are, and then total attendees across all your events. It's just a number. So this is quite interesting how we're going to make this. I'm very excited to explore all of this. So for the prerequisites, like I said, you only need two things: Node.js version 20 minimal.
Так, значит, Scott Moss еще не научился использовать. Опять забыл, как эта штука называется. Да что такое? Not version. Все, наверное, попадаем под условия.
And then Git. That's it. Doesn't matter if you're on Windows. Doesn't matter if you're on Linux, Mac.
Вольта, ё-моё. Вольта, точно. Вот эта штука.
Just those two things, because it's just a Next.js app. So I already said this at the beginning, but fork the repo, clone it, pull it down. Make sure you do an npm install. I have a package lock in there, which is used by npm to make sure all the versions of all the dependencies resolve to the same versions.
О, смотрите, здесь он объясняет, зачем нужен package.log.json. Давай. In there, which is used by npm to make sure all the versions of all dependencies resolve to the same version that I have now.
Of all the dependencies resolve to the same versions that I have now. If you do yarn, if you do bun to install, it'll install them. But in the future, when those things get upgraded and have breaking changes, you could also have breaking changes as well. So if you just want to, I mean, I guess technically you shouldn't, because the package.json has a character in front of it for preventing it from having like break and change downloads. But you can't trust developers won't introduce break and changes in minors and patches, which they do a lot. So just don't trust it. Just use npm to install the packages. And then if you want to use bun or something else to actually execute it, I've tested it in the latest version of bun. I use bun for everything. It works just fine. But
Он говорит, бан юзает. А бан это что у нас такое? A fast all-in-one JavaScript runtime. Ну, типа Node.js, Denoserve и бан. Возможно. А бан как переводится? Булочка. Что юзаешь? Я юзаю. Что используешь? Я пользуюсь булочкой. Булочка. Булочка. Нормальная тема. Toolkit designed for speed, complete with a bundler, test runner, and Node.js compatible package manager. Comprehensive developer experience for bundling JavaScript apps, including package manager, test runner, and bundler. Интересная задача, когда это имеет смысл. Ладно.
We'll be using npm and Node for this entire course.
То есть получается, что вот этот OG Scott Moss юзает arc и ban. И arc. Достаточно специфичные штуки на грани.
The next thing is setting up a database. I went back and forth on whether or not should I just do an in-memory database, should I just mock this out, should I just fake it, and like I just feel like I wasn't, to really, solidify this and make this feel like a production and get the best value. It's best just to have a real database here. Databases are so easy to set up these days. Why not? In the last courses I taught, we set up a database and it was super simple. So we're gonna use the same one, and that's from a database provider called Terso. If you never heard of Terso,
Он предлагает нам сделать аккаунт. Мы уже его смотрели. Давай, sign up. Sign up with GitHub. For a side project. Так, ну пока не будем ничего нажимать.
So it's pretty cool. It's basically like hosted SQLite. In fact, they forked SQLite and made something called libSQL. If you've never heard of SQLite, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like light SQL. It's like SQL, but in a file. So it's very portable. You can use it locally on a phone. You can use it locally on a browser. You can put it on the edge. You can put it on a server. It kind of just goes everywhere. It's a pretty useful database, but no one's been ever able to scale it until now. There's other companies that kind of do the same thing. We're just using this one because they have a generous free plan, and it's very easy to get set up. So that's why we're using it. As far as getting set up, make an account. It's free. Once you do that, I already have one, so I'm just going to log in. I'm just going to walk you through some of the stuff. If you're signing up for the first time, it'll like take you through an onboarding process where it asks you to create a database. Go ahead and create a database. There's like an option on there that says create a replica. You don't need that. You don't need a replica. Just create a database. You can call it whatever you want. Doesn't matter. But eventually they'll dump you to this screen. Once you get to this screen, you can just click on your databases. Click on the one that you want. In my case, it's called Party. And you just want to keep track of this URL. We need to add this URL into our environment variables in our repo so we can actually have a database. So here's your URL. And then the last thing is there's a button here that you can hit that'll generate a JSON web token. We also need to add that to our environment variable. So that's really it as far as the database. So again, Terso, sign up, click databases, click your database, keep note of this URL.
Так, ну а мы-то какую базу данных будем использовать? Будем пользоваться базой данных Скотта Мосса или свою нужно куда генерить?
Generate a token, copy that. You can generate as many tokens as you want. Once you have that, make a .env on the root of that repo, and you just need these two environment variables. Terso connection URL, Terso auth token.
Это типа мы обозреваем, да? Или это там нужно делать уже, да? Непонятно.
And yeah, you put the connection URL there, you put the token there. I already have mine set up. The last step, once you add your .env, is you need to push the schema up to the database. So this is how you know you're done. So what you need to do, once you add your .env file, there is a command in the package JSON. You can run that by saying npm run db push. Run that command. Yours might say exactly what mine says or not. My database already has this schema, so the output might be different. But you just want to say, yes, I want to execute all these statements. Once you do that, it's going to attempt to apply those changes. You shouldn't have any issues since it's a brand new database. And you know you're done when it says changes applied. That's when you know your database is in sync with your schema. The schema is already written. We won't be writing database schemas today. It's not a database course, but if you're curious, you can go check it out. Hopefully everybody had a chance to set up their Terso database and sync their schema. That is the last configuration with databases that we will be doing on this course, although we will be writing a lot of database queries using an ORM called Drizzle. If you don't have any experience with that, that's totally fine.
Drizzle. ORM-ка, да? Так, а так, что надо сделать? Нужно вот эти шаги сделать. Так, continue to dashboard. Button below to create a new database. Ready to create your first replica. Replica is a copy of your database that you can use to lower the read latency in your application. Doors automatically routes your request to closest replica. Ой, еще раз, что такое реплика? It's a copy of your database that you can use to lower the read latency of your application. No, create database. Electric Tara. Нормально. Primary location. Давай, нормально. Create database. Создается.
Like I said.
Так, а потом что надо сделать? Вот эту дичь надо, да, прописать в N файле. О, типа вот это сделано. Давай, create реплика. Не будем реплику создавать. Давай, continue to dashboard. Так, databases. Databases. Так, и как нам посмотреть? Дичь. Так, вот databases, вот URL. Скопировали URL. В .env нужно выставить. Создать надо .env файл. Идем в инструкции. Так, закрываем булочку. Вольту. Инструкции с кодом ОСа. Step 1. Переменная. URL-ку и токен. Generate токен. И токен. Все. Настройки сделаны. Ну-ка, а есть, чтобы .env подсвечивало? А, наверное, не надо. Ну, давай посмотрим. Neither. Done. Так, ну типа вот мы сделали эту конфигурацию. Погнали дальше.
And yeah, you put the connection URL there, you put the token there. I already have mine set up. The last step, once you add your .env, is you need to push the schema up to the database. So this is how you know you're done. So what you need to do, once you add your .env file, there is a command in the package JSON. You can run that by saying npm run db push. Run that.
npm run db push. Drizzle kit на SQL config drizzle config ts. Config from drizzle kit. А, вот он что про drizzle говорил, да, что типа вот он эту URM-ку эту юзает. Driver torso out migrations. Database схема. Full stack development. Ban. Middleware. Seed database. DB from DB. Create client. libSQL. Drizzle. Как раз вот мы подставляем эти токены и database, да, и это все скармливаем Drizzle о рамке. И есть этот перс такой в Dota 2. А уже в конфиге Drizzle, да, мы скармливаем схему. Уточняем, что мы используем торсо. И еще раз credential указываем. Satisfies config. Я, кстати, вот эту штуку не знал, что satisfies config. А чем отличается satisfies от обычного S? Кастинга обычного. Ну-ка. Type create satisfy vs. Не один я спрашиваю. Не один я таким вопросом задавался. Will be unknown. Also, like as, it can be used in an expression. One does not need to declare a variable for it. This is especially useful for frameworks like Vue that use object literals a lot. Looks like an improper union to me. If you know green должен быть boolean, it's a distinct type. But unlike as, it is type safe. Короче, вот, квинтэссенция.
That command,
Да, нужно, короче, вот эту дичь. Мы исследовали, откуда берется вот этот скрипт и что он делает. Вот этот. И выполняем вот эту команду.
yours might say exactly what mine says or not. My database already has this schema, so the output might be different. But you just want to say, yes, I want to execute all these statements. Once you do that, it's going to attempt to apply those changes. You shouldn't have any issues since it's a brand new database.
Changes applied.
And you know you're done when it says changes applied. That's when you know your database is in sync with your schema. The schema is already written. We won't be writing database schemas today. It's not a database course, but if you're curious, you can go check it out. Hopefully everybody had a chance to set up their Terso database and sync their schema. That is the last configuration with databases that we will be doing on this course, although we will be writing a lot of database queries using an ORM called Drizzle. If you don't have any experience with that, that's totally fine. Like I said earlier, the code is in the notes and on GitHub, so just follow along. I wanted to...
Давай на Drizzle посмотрим. Wait, what's an ORM? Статья довольно большая. Читать мы ее, конечно, сейчас не будем. Я скину ее в чатик. Дикин Дикпер. Мы прочитаем, что такое ORM и почему он отличается. Even if you are using a non-relational database now, think MongoDB of Redis. То есть, sooner or later you likely need a relational DB. Knowing SQL is an essential skill for any software engineer. But writing SQL directly can be tricky. The tooling is actually primitive, with only minimal autocomplete to guide you, and you invariably go through the process of running your query, correction errors, and repeating until you get it right. ORM is trying to help you with this process of crafting SQL. Typically, you tell the ORM about the shape of your DB, and it exposes IP to typical things. If you have a books table in your DB, an ORM will give you an IP for it where you can do stuff like books find .ditch. Behind the scene SQL created might be something like select all from books web pages больше 500. Ну, короче, делает более человеческую семантику, да? Некая абстракция над запросами. Ну, типа, помимо того, что, типа, ты не знаешь, тебе не нужно знать синтаксис SQL, то ORM из коробки тебе еще дает, да, избавляет тебя от страглинг, как, типа, запилить специфичный запрос, и из коробки дает тебе типа правильность этого запроса с точки зрения оптимизации. Select n плюс 1 problem. Что за select n плюс 1 problem? Мы не будем все читать, просто прочитаем, что такое n плюс 1 problem, query problem. The chief symptom of this problem is that there are many queries being performed. Typically, this happens when you structure your code so that you first do a query to get a list of records. Then, subsequently, do another query for each of those records. You might expect that many small queries will be fast and one large complex query will be slow. This is rarely the case. In practice, the opposite is true. Each query has to be sent to the database. The database has to perform the query. Then it sends the result back on your app. The more queries you perform, the more time it takes to get the results back. With each trip, the database saves talking time and resources. In contrast, in a single query, even if this complex can be optimized, the database server and only requires one trip to the database, which will usually be much faster than many small queries. Ну, примерно понятно. Проблема один большой или много маленьких. which you might cause without realizing. Drizzle takes a novel approach. Drizzle does provide you a traditional ORM querying API, like we saw above. It also provides an API that essentially a layer of typing on top of SQL itself. So rather than what we saw before, we might query our books table like this. Database select from books. Интересная тема. It's small lines, but it's closer to actual SQL, which provide us some nice benefits. It's easier to learn, more flexible, and avoids traditional RAM full guns. Вот оно что.
To talk about React and how it plays into some of the new things in Next.js. I don't want to go too deep because a lot of it is probably going to be covered in some of the newer React courses that are going to be taught by other instructors like Brian Holt. But there's a lot of crossover in between what React is doing
Брайана Холта мы знаем.
and how Next.js takes that and puts
Брайан Холт нормальный парень.
their own spin on it. And I just want you all to know like what is actually React and what is actually Next.js. So this is something I'll be talking about throughout the entire course, but this is just like the preamble. So things like server components, you've probably heard of that first on Next.js in the app directory, but server components is not something that was created by Next.js. It's actually part of React. It's a React thing. It is now included in React 18, React 19, but it's there. Next.js just took a gamble and decided to implement it early on because they knew that, you know, they have close ties with the React team. They knew that that was going to be finalized, so they went ahead and adopted it early on and incorporated it into the framework, which is where I think a lot of the heat that they got for the app directory when it first came out, people were like, oh, what's this? This is kind of crazy. But it took until the React team was like, no, yeah, we're doing server components. That's a thing. And then now that's a standard. And then now it's like, okay, Next.js makes sense because it's such an easier way to do server components. Just like when there was, you know, static or server-side rendering. Yeah, you can do server-side rendering in React, but like who wants to make that framework? I don't. So like Next.js abstracts that away for you. So it's kind of the same concept. But again, they didn't create server-side rendering. They didn't create server components. They just give you a bunch of opinions around it. And the same thing is true for client components. They didn't create that as well. That directive where it says use server, use client, that is a React thing. That is not a Next.js thing. I know they got a lot of heat for that. Like, oh, why do you got to put this at the top of the file? It's like, well, we didn't come up with that. That's what the React team wanted. Streaming and suspense. This was actually introduced in earlier React versions, but like suspense, man, that's been a dream since 2015. I remember when they started talking about that, and like it's now.
Ну, неплохо. Ну, он мечтал об этом в 2015-м. Я только в конце 2016-го в тусовку начал вписываться.
Fully realized, in my opinion, in such a way that you don't have to think about it, and you'll see how we incorporate it. But this basically is also something created by React, being able to, you know, show some type of component while your UI is waiting for some data to load, and then have a fallback there. That's something that the React team created. Next.js didn't create that. They just have a bunch of opinions around it, like everything else, and they make it, in my opinion, super simple. Streaming, also, that is something not actually created by React, but was made possible by React, just the nature of being able to render components on the server, but basically just being able to stream down chunks of a UI at a time without having to block a whole page. It's not something that is unique to Next.js. It's just React has made it possible, and then they built an implementation on top of it. So but we will be talking about some of that stuff. The cache function, that's actually something new to React 18. I think it was maybe in beta in React 18. React 19 is definitely there, but this is like a per request memoization of server-side actions. We're gonna dive into this a lot if you're like, what is this guy talking about? But the only reason I bring this up because I was looking on Reddit the other day and like there was so much hate for this on the Next.js team. But again, the React team made this. This is not the Next.js's function. It's just something the React team made, which is actually quite useful. If you've ever done GraphQL on a server, this is very similar to like a data loader where you are caching things on a per request level. So you're not, doing like you're not doing multiple database queries for the same thing on one single request. So it's actually quite useful. Transitions are basically like you want to change some state in a component, but you don't want the UI to be blocked. So if you use a useState hook, that blocks the UI. So what if you want to change some state but not block the UI? That's what a transition is.
Так, ну-ка давай еще раз прослушаем, как он объяснил transitions. Давай.
Data loader where you are caching things on a per request level, so you're not, doing like you're not doing multiple database queries for the same thing on one single request. So it's actually quite useful. Transitions are basically like you want to change some state in a component, but you don't want the UI to be blocked. So if you use a useState hook, that blocks the UI. So what if you want to change some state but not block the UI? That's what a transition is. I think Next.js got a lot of heat for this because the React team didn't really like finalize it, or they didn't have like good use cases for it. And at the same time, server actions were really not that useful. And in the Next.js docs, they were talking about you can use this transition thing, and then they tried to explain how to use it. Well, now because it's part of React in the docs and the Next.js docs, they kind of just link out to it. They're like, here, we're not even gonna talk about it. Click here and go read it from the React docs because this is just too crazy to explain. We will be using transitions and we'll talk about it and how I use it. And then server form actions. This is the one where I think for most JavaScript developers, they were like, what? Why are we doing this? Why did we go from doing asynchronous functions on form submit, doing an on submit handler, to now we're doing actions on the server side? This kind of feels like PHP or Laravel or something like that. And if you ever use one of those frameworks, if you look at Next.js, 13 and beyond, it feels just like one of those frameworks for better or for worse. So form actions, again, that's something that is made possible by React, the framework, and not so much of Next.js. So Next.js is just really building on some of these foundations with their own opinions. There really isn't anything new that they're introducing here other than their opinions on top of these standards. Let's dive into our first one. So form actions. There's a lot to say here. There's a lot of pain on my side that I went through using these when they first came out, but now we're on the other side and everything looks great. And the APIs have been formalized and settled, and there's tons of different use cases and patterns and still more evolving every single day. So I'm more than excited to talk about form actions and how they work in Next.js. So first, in order to understand that, you got to know what server components and server actions are. If you don't know what server components are from the intro course, or you've never really kind of thought about it, there's a difference between a server component and server-side rendering, right? Server-side rendering is for, in the case of Next.js, it's literally for every single component. Every component is going to be server-side rendered, whether it's a client component or a server component. It's always going to be server-side rendered unless you import it with the next dynamic, unless you lazy load it, basically. If you don't lazy load it, it's going to be imported. It's going to be rendered on the server. A server component is a component that gets executed on a server per a route. So it's a slight difference. So rendering is basically like, I'm going to take this, I'm going to see if I can create a static version of this, as in, I'm going to see if I can output some HTML. I'm going to see if I can create an HTML string for this. There's like a whole hydration step and things like that. Server component is basically like every time someone hits this route, run this function, right? That function just happens to be a component. That's what a server component is. So it's slightly different than server-side rendering, which depending on the component could be an initial render, could be something that revalidates, things like that. So That's the difference there. I think people get confused about that because the naming, server component, server-side rendering, they need to figure it out. The naming is really confusing.
Давай еще раз. Более внимательно прочитаем об этом. Покрупнее. Понятно. Allow functions to execute on the server.
Server action. So with the server component, you're able to, if you've used the app directory before, you know that you can make your components asynchronous and you can do anything that you can do on the back end inside the component. So this means like accessing a database directly without having to go over the wire, literally accessing the file system if you wanted to. Anything you can do on the back end, you can do in that component asynchronously. And then, so they kind of just built that a little further and made another abstraction, which is something called a server action. You can think of a server action as like the equivalent of what you would have done for a post request. So typically like on a form, you know, you on submit, you make a fetch to do a post request to some server to send the data up, you get the data back, and that's how you submit the form. Well, it's kind of eliminating that process of having to go over the wire. And instead, we can create a function on the server that gets executed when some action is triggered. In this case, it'll be when a form is submitted. And that way we don't have to go over the wire. Well, I mean, technically it's still going over the wire, but you didn't have to make a route for it. So that's basically what a server action is. It's a function that runs on the server that can be called on the client, and it will trigger some logic. And then there's like different ways to like handle it and stuff like that. We'll get into it. This is just the high level. Some of the other cool things about form actions is that it really simplifies how we manage each form's field. So before you had to like make a state for this field, make a state for this field. Eventually you probably just like made one object state and did that. Eventually from there you would go install some form hook that someone made and you would use that. And because it's like managing state for form is quite complicated. Now we don't have to do that. I can't remember the last time I actually made a controlled input.
Ну, надо сказать, что сейчас тоже больше используем uncontrolled формы, обрабатываем. Используем React Hook form.
Using this, a controlled input is when you add the value of an input and then you do like an on change and then you feed that back into it. That's just the standard, but I don't remember the last time I did that, which feels great because it's so tedious setting that up, and you'll see why. And then there's some other stuff in here that it doesn't really matter talking about. It's better just to show you, but basically there's some hooks in here that help us do what I just said as far as like the form state, do optimistic updates, keeping track of changes, things like that. But we're just
Ну что, ребятки, 1,5 часа прошло от стрима. Давайте предлагаю сделать перерыв. Небольшой, минуточек 15. 20. И продолжим заниматься обзором курсика. Давайте выберем что-нибудь. Но эти плоскодонки — это прошлый век. Давай, вот это будем смотреть. Вот он как раз 15 минуточек. Вот мы его и посмотрим. Так, к такому я готов не был. Ну, типа, так тоже можно. Увидела знакомое лицо. Скуфа мотнули. Что-то недоразумение какое-то. Надувная жопа. Что-то кажется, что можно и получше. Что-то выбрать. Недоволен. Так, watch later. Вот что-то тут было такое у меня. Sort newest. Во.
And just got my great. Seeing as I'm 4 days out, we cut all other supplements on peak week. Normally, I would be using the Dr. Fear EAAs, the Venom pre-workout,
Как
and
только
the Mr.
качаться.
Baines, but we just don't. We want to make sure that there's no sweeteners or anything during those final weeks, just in case it manipulates the body in a way that we don't want, like holding a little bit of extra water or something like that.
Нормально. Вопрос, да, тоже. Как относиться к надувным жопам? Так-то вроде это и неплохо. С одной стороны. А с другой чувствуешь себя немного обманутым. Да? Это как с носом. Сейчас я покажу. Память, о чем речь. Так вот, history. Где-то тут. Во. То есть, да, имеем вот такую вот еврейку. Или, ну, что-то вот вокруг этого. Да, такое. Абду Аль-Майбибу. с клювом, с таким. Ну, очевидно, что это не ценности белого человека. Это не по стандартам красоты белой женщины, это отвратительно. Крючковатый нос, так, с горбом. И в итоге мы приходим к стандартам белой красоты. То есть, понимаете, да, о чем я? Итак, всем добрый вечер. Продолжаем нашу тусовочку. Объявляю перерыв завершенным. Погнали про auth actions.
We're gonna hop into it because that's the fun part. So if you click on implementation, basically the implementation is all the code we're about to write for this. What we need to do, the goal is to, if you saw when I did the demo of the app, I had the sign in form, the sign up form. We need to make that work.
Here is link to the code. Key concepts in form handling with React and Next.js. Юзаем form data, да. Enhancement for complex form. For form with multiple fields. Manage to validate complex data sets which interlevel applications where forms are data intensive. With React hooks, да. Прикольненько. Типа он нам предлагает посмотреть этот код. Примеры форм. Auth actions. Ну давай.
Doesn't do anything until we hook this up. So first what you need to do is you need to check out to a different branch. You check out to the step/0 branch. This branch it doesn't work. There's nothing in here. There's only like the bare minimum in here. Our goal is to get this to work. All right, we're gonna go in and start making these things work together.
Так. Step 0.
The main branch is where everything is completed. So that's what I showed you at the beginning. But we're going to start on step 0 with pretty much everything stripped out. And we need to go in and enable it.
Давай. Понятно. Давай, npm run dev. Посмотрим, что получилось. Она еще собирается. You don't have аккаунт. А какой аккаунт? А как сделать аккаунт? Давай. Окей, чекаут. Step 0. А почему через слэш? Почему он назвал через слэш? Origin step 0. Так, что имеем тут? Dev. Четыреста четыре. Какие есть у нас руты? Out. Sign in, sign up. Dashboard. Home. Sign up. Один, два, три, четыре, пять. По интеру. Это что было? А кнопки нету, да? Так, свичнулись.
First thing we're going to do is getting those authentication forms to work using form actions. So the first thing we need to do is, so again, I'm going to tell you like what my opinion of it is, while also telling you like what I think Next.js wants you to do. It's not, they don't always match. What I like to do with my actions is I like to put them in an actions folder on the root. There's many ways to make actions. You can make them directly inside of a server. You can make them directly inside of a server component and different things like that. I prefer to put them on the roots. You can even make them inside of client components. When you do that, it's just really hard to like test them, move them around, just like any other piece of code. So I just put them all in a folder. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make a folder called actions. And for our actions as far as like being able to sign in and sign up, we're going to make a file called auth. These are going to be all the actions we use for authentication. So let's do that. So on the root, not inside the app directory, but literally on the root of the repo, I'm going to make a new folder called actions. And inside of there, a new file called auth.ts. So yeah, please.
Давай. Чё он? Давай. In the root directory actions, inside the root lm auth. Ну, кстати, можно, знаете, как еще сделать? Сейчас я удалю. Можно вот так вот сделать. Сейчас. Create new file. И так вот. Actions. Auth. TS. И оно создать директорию. И в него положит файл auth. И типа туда мы копируем вот этот код. Давай смотреть. Зод. Что такое зод? Зод npm. TypeScript first, schema validation. Will automatically infer the static TypeScript type. Register user. Sign in user. Await sign in. Of those. Drizzle.com. Drizzle ORM. Equal типа, да? Ну, типа валидируем вот эту дичь. Sign up. Да, посмотрим. Insert users. А users мы откуда взяли? From схема. Values. Hashed password. И returning ID, email, creates add user rows. Не знаю, ребята, а вы как думаете, нормальная практика объявлять функцию, ну, пользоваться фичой в TypeScript, что выражение, ну, function expression доступны выше их объявления. Меня так это всегда смущает. Как-то все-таки я ожидаю, что то, что мы используем ниже, ну, что мы должны использовать. Ну, сначала объявляем, потом используем. Хочется, короче, вот так вот сделать. Ну, вот сюда. Сюда поставить хочется. Так, ну ладно. Погнали дальше.
Follow along if you can. And then from there, there are a few imports. Get back to my notes. That we want to use. Let's talk about the use server directive and why we need this outside of a component. Right. So, use server. Anybody know what this does? This directive does? Or want to guess?
Forces this page to be processed on the server.
That's a, yeah. You would think so.
Well,
There's actually
okay.
a where is it? Server only. That's what this does. Yeah, but that makes sense. Use server should force it, right? Yeah, this use server is a hint to the React compiler that this file should be ran in a Node.js environment. Basically, it's like, oh, this should be ran in a Node.js environment. It also hints, at like how when you start composing components together, like a client component with a server component, it hints to the compiler that like, oh, these things can't belong in this order. You can't import a server component into a client component or something like that. So it gives the compiler like hints, and it tells it like what environment it should run in and what it has access to. Also, just from a human perspective, it's just something you can look at to be like, okay, I know this file has the context of a server, so therefore we're good. But in the case of Next.js and React, you have to add this. You cannot use an action, a server action, without that server action being scoped inside of a use server directive, either globally in the page or in a component. You could put use server at the top of the function you're making, which I think is a gross UI. And you should pretty much always do this, in my opinion. I don't know why they even show you the other one, but you could do it. As far as these imports, cookies, nothing special here. I will talk about how this is used because it's kind of cool. I already have some pre-made sign-in, sign-up functions. You can go check those out. We won't be working on those. It's just being able to like take an email password, hash it, sign in, take an email password, hash it, sign up, that type of thing. Typical email password, sign up, nothing crazy. Zod, we're going to use this for schema validation so we can validate our inputs. Redirect, so we can redirect to the dashboard once someone signs in or signs up, and the name of the cookie that we'll be setting. So what we need to do, the objective, is we need to create a function in which we can call when someone completes the sign up form. We're going to call that register user. And we need to create a function which we can call when someone creates the sign in form. We'll call that sign in user. So let's do that. So for register user, go back to my code. Let's do that. I'll say const register user equals async. And I'll talk about these arguments. So the first argument is going to be the previous state of the form that this action is going to be bound to. That's going to make more sense when we go make the JSX. But we're going to be using this special hook that basically provides the previous state of the form as the first argument into which the action that you give it. It's part of the spec of this special hook that we're going to be using. So we won't be using this example, but that's always going to be the first argument. And then the second argument is actually going to be the form data, which is going to be type form data. If you don't know what form data type is, it's just a map. It's a map of all the input fields by the name that you gave them in the form. So we have that. Like always, never trust a client. Probably want to validate these inputs before you do anything. So I'm using Zod here to make a schema for that. So I just created a schema. If you don't know what Zod is, it's just a runtime schema validation library. You can create a schema.
Never trust the client. Хороший принцип. Ребятам с бэка надо будет напомнить об этом.
Pass it an object and try to validate it. It'll throw an error if it doesn't match. It'll succeed if it does. It's a very popular schema validation tool. So we have our alt schema here. It's just checking to make sure that this object has an email. And it has a password. And they're both type string. So once we do that, what we want to do is we want to try to validate that schema. We can do the parse function. By default, this is going to throw an error if it fails. That's fine. We'll talk about how we might want to handle that. So let's do that. We'll say data equals alt schema dot parse, and we want to pass in the email here. That's going to be form data dot get because it's a map, and the field on that form is going to be called email. And then for password, it's the same thing, just password.
Ну, чтобы достать из форм даты по вот этому мэпу, мы должны использовать name, атрибут name в инпутах формы.
Have to call the get method on maps. Okay, assuming that's good, we're gonna wrap the next part in a try catch, the actual sign up part. And the reason we want to do that is so we can show a message on the form if the sign up fails. So we're gonna try catch that. So let's do that. So we'll say, let's try and get a token from awaiting the sign up function that's imported at the top. This just takes in data. It takes in an object with the email and password, which is what this schema returns if it's valid because it's email password. So that's that object. It returns an object with a user and a token. We're just going to destructure and get the token. And then if it succeeds, what we need to do is we're using JSON Web Tokens for authentication, and I'm just going to set them in a cookie. The reason I'm setting them in the cookie is because I want to be able to access the JSON Web Token on all of my server-side calls and functions, which have access to the cookies. If I store the JSON Web Token in like a local storage or something like that, I would not be able to access that JSON Web Token server-side. There's no way to access local storage from a server. And because we're not sending any requests on a lot of these things, I can't just take it out the local storage and send it to the server. It's possible. It's just a lot more work. I just didn't feel like doing it. So, and honestly, you should be storing JSON Web Tokens in secure cookies anyway. You shouldn't be storing them in local storage. So, we need to set it. You can use the cookies. We're able to use cookies here on the server because, again, we didn't make the request, but essentially what's happening here is a request. So, just like any request, any request handler, we have access to the request. So, by just importing the cookies, it already knows what current request is happening right now. So we don't have to tell it. So we can just call cookies and it knows what to do. So in this case, I'm just gonna say cookies.set the cookie name with the token. And then if there's any error, just log the error, and then we're gonna send back a message. So let's do that. So we'll log the error, we'll send back a message, failed to sign up. And at the end, if everything works, we'll do a redirect to /dashboard. You might be asking, why don't I just put the redirect here in the try after here? There is a bug for some reason on this redirect. I had to go deep into the Next.js issues to figure this out. If you put this in a try catch, it actually catches an error somehow. I guess there's an error being thrown here, even though it works, and that your try catch will catch it and it will land here. It won't actually redirect. So don't put a redirect in a try catch. I don't know if that's a bug, if that's intentional.
Don't put redirect in the try catch. Запомним. Даже напишем заметку. Don't put redirect вот сюда. Вот тут пишем. Don't put redirect in a try catch.
But yeah, I was stuck on this for like 2 days about 3 months ago, and that's what I found out. Don't put it in a try catch.
Поняли? Чувак встрял на пару дней из-за этого. Пару месяцев назад. Очень хороший инсайт. В чатик напишу сейчас тоже. Don't put redirect in a try catch.
But yeah, I was stuck on this for like 2 days about 3 months ago, and that's what I found out. Don't put it in a try catch. Cool, so we have that. Let's export this, register user. Now we want to hook this up to the form. So let's do that. We go back to our notes. A couple things we need to do is, one, we're going to create a submit button. I'll talk about why the button is separate from the rest of the form. And then we need to add all that stuff to the form, which should be mostly built out, I think. I can't remember what state I left it in, but let's go check it out. So if we go to app, you should see a auth folder with parentheses in it.
Quick refresher — это group routing.
Refresher, parentheses around a folder in Next.js app directory means it is a this route segment won't have a route. There won't be a /auth, but you want a folder because you want all these child segments to share a layout. So it's like a group. It's called a...
Короче, смысл group routing — это sharing layout. Давай тоже запишем. Group routing is for sharing layout.
A route group. It's like I want to group all these routes together so they can share this layout, but I don't want to make a new route segment called auth. So in this case, I can still go to /signup and /signin. Whereas if I didn't have these parentheses, it'd be /auth signup /auth signin, which is gross. So I put this parentheses here, which allows me to not have that in the route segment, but still get the benefit of sharing a layout here because they're basically the same thing. So that's what that is. Okay, so let's go to, actually we're gonna go to components. We're gonna go to sign up form, and this is where we wanna do our work. So in the sign up form, notice it's a client component. This is important. This is very important. This is a client component. You can import server actions in client components. That's the whole point of them actually, is because most of the time, if you think about it, you probably wanna call some action on some user interaction, on a click, on a submit, on something a user did. You can think of it as the same case in which, where you would have made a post request. You would have made any type of request when a user did something. Okay, replace that request with a server action. Now I want to do a server action when a user does something. Right now we're specifically talking about forms, but later we'll talk about how you can use server actions on any interaction, not just forms. Okay, any questions on that? I think the Next.js docs just over explains that, but it's really just a function that you call that gets executed on a server, but you can call it on the client. Like the best way I can describe it is like, imagine if you had some code gen where it's like if you made a function on a server, you run the script and it automatically creates a route for you and abstracts that route away in a function that you can call anywhere. That's like the best way I can describe it. It's just an abstracted route that you didn't have to configure yourself. Okay, cool. So first thing is we need to use the use form state hook to set up our state, and then we need to bind that to our form, and then we can kind of use the message here to show an error message, and we'll go from there. So first what we want is the use form state. Notice that comes from React DOM. That does not come from Next.js. That is a React thing. So we got that. We're gonna create an initial state. Since we're only passing a message, we're just gonna have our initial state just be a null.
Component sign up form. Submit button. Command Shift P. Restart test server. expected 2 or more, but got 1.
Message like this. I'm going to create our hook. Use form state. Use form state takes in 2 arguments. It's going to take in the actual action you want to run when the form is submitted as the first argument, and then the initial state is the second argument. So the action we want to run is going to be the register user one that we just made.
Давайте почитаем про эту функцию. А где? React DOM use form state. Очень странно, что я с первого же клика не могу найти use form state. Первый раз вижу такой хук. И доки по нему нету. Вот React DOM. Вот. И здесь нету. Вот client API. Сервер API. Rules of React. Use form. Так, ну ладно.
So I'm gonna say register user, and then the initial state is the initial state here. My TypeScript is freaking out. This thing freaks out if you don't give it a generic. You don't have to, it's just TypeScript, but if you want to, I do have it in the notes. You basically just type out the initial state if you want to do that. I'll just do it right now for all the TypeScript snobs out there. So message would be, string or null. This is just gonna freak out. Don't worry about that. And then here, just type out the initial state. If you want to do that, I'll just do it right now for all the TypeScript snobs out there. So message would be, string script, but if you want to, this thing freaks out if you don't give it a generic. You don't have to, it's just TypeScript, but if you want to, I do have it in the notes. You basically just type out the initial state. If you want to do that, I'll just do it right now for all the TypeScript snobs out there. So message would be, string or null. This is just gonna freak out. Don't worry.
This is just gonna freak out. Что значит freak out? Freak. To shock or disoriented someone. To panic, to lose control. Whoa, don't freak out. It's not the end of the world. Ну, типа, не сходи с ума. How you react when something really bad? See, we need to talk, or good happens. A manic-crazy feeling usually accompanied by some physical activity such as jumping, keeping. Don't freak out. Ну, типа...
Worry about that. And then here, what it returns is going to be a tuple, like most hooks in React. The first one's going to be the actual form state.
Так, понятно, что фрикаут. А register user-то что делать? Pref state form data. Получается, тут просто стоит. Тут нет pref state. Так что ли получается? Или как получается? Подход 1. Почему у него работает-то все? Ну ладно, оставим это freak out.
In this case, it's going to be an object with a message on it. And then the action that you can call, in this case, we're going to bind it to the form action. So let's do that. So we have our form state. And then we have our action. And then on the form, it's not on submit. No longer are you doing on submit. On submit is a client-side thing. A form action, if you're OG, you know it's like.
If you're OG. Да. Original gangster.
You know, you typically like give it a URL, right? You'd be like, oh, I want to go to like this route here, .php or something, right? You do something like that, right? That's OG right there. So it's the same thing, except for it's like, well, I just want to run this action, which is, again, it's like a concealed route. It's like a route that was made for you. Concealed as a function. So it's very similar to just putting a route there. You just don't know what that route is. It's a generated route. Any questions so far?
I do have one question. Out of curiosity, I know this is a client component.
Yes.
And I'm assuming because some of the components that we're importing are also client components. But I'm just curious, would it be possible to maybe replicate this form purely as like a server component?
If you replicate this form as a server component, then you couldn't handle any of the interactions because interactions are only possible on the client. So as soon as you go server component, you have no interactions. So server components are typically read-only. Yeah, so a form, I would imagine if you added a form, you want some type of interaction. So yeah, there wouldn't be a simple way to do that. And then we need to add our submit.
Это типа мы use client, да? Обязательно. У нас и кнопочка sign up. Добавляем кнопочку sign up.
Submit button here, which I have the code for here. So let's talk about the submit button. Go to our components folder. We're going to make a new component. We're going to call it submit button. Submit button.tsx. This is also going to be a client. So I'm going to say use client. I'll make my component. People still use snippets. I feel like I just never got into snippets, but I should, because I've done this same thing that I just did a million times. Probably I'll have like a year taken off my life just writing.
Ну, вообще, недолго написать этот скаффолдинг. Boilerplate. Не скаффолдинг, boilerplate. Я тоже сниппеты не юзаю.
Next.js components. So for the submit button, this one used a different hook called use form status. This one's actually really cool because everyone has done the alternative to this, and I'm going to talk about it. You're all going to know what I'm talking about. But this one basically, in this case, gives us like a free pending state. When this component, whenever this hook use form status is embedded in a component that's a child of a form, it knows the status of that form's action automatically. So as long as this button is inside of a form that's using a form action, it will know the status on that action, whether it's pending or not. It has to be embedded into a form. That's why we put it in another component. So we can reuse it on multiple forms and it'll work on any form. So it's just a generic submit button that when placed in a form, will give you the status of that form's action. So let's make that. So I think what I have, I had a label and some props. So label, so you can put whatever you want on there. And then just the rest of the button props. I'm using a component library called Next.UI. So that's, I had to add some design. I can't like come out here with just plain HTML. Like, can't do that. So we have the pending state. This is going to be from the use form status. That's from React DOM.
Ну, use form status мы читаем про use form status. А use form state на 19 React Брайан Холд сделает обзорные курсики. Мы их с вами тоже пройдем чуть позже. Вот здесь. Вот этот чувак, Брайан Холд. Вот у него воркшоп назначен. Вот как раз вот Intro to SQLite. Вот эту тему, которую мы сейчас с Скоттом Моссом юзаем. И вот здесь вот Complete Intro to React V9 и Intermediate React V6. Вот эти штуки мы пройдем. Это вот 28 октября будет.
Again, nothing to do with Next.js. It's React DOM. In fact, I think they just made a change to this in React 19. I'm sure Brian will probably cover it in his course, but there's a slight change to how this works.
Ну вот он как раз говорит, что Брайан будет обозревать это.
I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's slightly different than what I'm showing here. But for the most part, it accomplishes the same thing. And then we're just going to return this button that I have from the Next.UI. Spread over those props. Make sure you put type submit here. This has to be type submit. This has nothing to do with Next.js. That's just how forms work. If you don't put submit, it won't know that you're submitting the form when you click the button. It'll just click. It won't do anything. And then this part's cool. This button component has an is loading prop. When true, it shows a spinner for you for free. Well, we'll just pass in the pending state. If pending is true, then loading is true. So we get that for free. Now the real question is, who's glad they don't have to make a state to keep track of a loading state just to set it to true, just to after you call it to set it to false, and then pass it around everywhere? Because that's the alternative to this. And I cannot stand doing that. It's so bad. So we get that for free now. So button props is loading. Oh, I guess I just need to import the button first. Let me do that. Quick tip is if you start writing the JSX like this, the autocomplete should allow you to get it without having to type in the import. But you have to like start writing it as JSX and not globally without the brackets. So that is loading. Set that to pending. We have our label here, and then we have our type submit. Cool. Now we have our generic.
Ребята, сорян, я прослушал тип от Скотта Мосса. Давайте еще раз его посмотрим.
We have our label here, and then we have our type submit. Cool. Now we have our generic button. All right, so we have that. We just need to bring that into our sign up form. I'm just gonna put it right above this div after the last input. Button props is loading. Oh, I guess I need to import the button first. Let me do that.
Типа, он хочет, чтобы у него button заимпортилось.
Quick tip is if you start writing the JSX like this, the autocomplete should allow you to get it without having to type in the import. But you have to like start writing it as JSX and not globally without the brackets.
Ну типа, понятно.
So that is loading. Set that to pending. We have our label here, and then we have our type submit. Cool. Now we have our generic button. All right. So we have that. We just need to bring that into our sign up form. I'm just gonna put it right above this div after the last input or submit button. There we go. The label on this one, what is it? Sign up. It'll be sign up, I guess. Cool. There we go. So now we can.
Так у нас тут просто submit, а не submit button. Ну, submit button.
Sign up. The other thing to note is in order for us to get this form data.getEmail.password, we need to make sure our form, their inputs have names on them. That's how it knows which one's which. If your inputs don't have the corresponding name inside the form data map, you won't be able to get it. So make sure you use the name field on your inputs so we know what to get from the form data. Okay, so let's check this out. Let's see if we can sign in. The rest of the app is 100% still gonna be broken, but let's see if we can sign in. I have to sign out first, so let me do that. Let me go delete my cookies. And I guess I got to run it as well. So I'm gonna run this, put up another tab here. And let's see what this sign up does. I'm using Arc. If you're like looking at my browser and you're like, what
Во-во-во. Говорит, что он говорит, я, говорит, юзаю Arc.
browser is this? This is Arc. If you've never seen it before, it's just an alternative to Chrome. It's pretty cool. Okay, so now we can sign up. I'm just gonna sign up with, I'm trying to think. I have so many users in this database, so I'm just gonna try to make a new one that I don't have.
Ну, давай. Один, два, три, четыре, пять. Sign up и редирект на дашборд. Триста три. 303. Статус код. See other. Ну-ка. HTTP. Статус код. 303. Just chat. Is typically used for redirections in which the server wants the client to use the different URL to access the requested resource, usually because the original URL has become invalid or outdated. Unlike 301, 302 redirect, 303 redirect is designed to be used for HTTP GET request only. And the client should always use the new URL when making subsequent requests to retrieve the resources. Вот оно что. Так. А базе данных-то создалось. Вот посмотрим. Edit tables. Users. О, смотри-ка. Password. Это что? Это 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Вот так вот захэшировалось. Смотри-ка, создалось.
And cool, I'm gonna do that. And then gonna hit sign up here. And boom, I got in. I'm home now. That worked. I can verify that I actually signed up a few ways. Well, other than the fact that it went here, a few ways. If you open up another terminal window, you can run this command, npm run db:studio. And what that is going to do is going to open up like a database explorer for your database.
Давай попробуем. Что нужно набрать? npm run db studio. Drizzle Studio requires a new version of Drizzle Kit. Please install the latest version and try it again. Давай. Drizzle RM, please update Drizzle RM package with the latest version. Drizzle RM. Оно же не в dev dependencies. Оно просто в dependencies. Стоп. Так. Готово. Specify dialect param in config file. Ну, началось. Drizzle config file. Больше не satisfied config. И какой у нас диалект? SQLite. Готово. Run Studio. Заработало. Да, смотри, то же самое можем видеть. Мы это уже видели. Вот здесь. На базе данных на сайте Турса. Где Drizzle Studio? Блять, Drizzle ведь. Dota 2. Dazzle, ёпта. Dazzle. Вот, и вот у нас users создана одна запись. Ну, слушай, неплохо.
So you can just command click on that URL, and you can see here, if I go, I can see here's that user I just signed up with in a database. It's right there.
Ну, смотри, а у него счетчиков тут нету. А у меня тут есть счетчики.
Yours might look different than mine. I put like a custom theme on mine.
What's the difference between use form state and just using pending with use transition?
We will get into use transition later. But TLDR, using a transition is a way to get the status of a server action outside of a form. Whereas if you do the use form state, you get it for free. So it's just like the form specific version of a transition, whereas a transition is like anything could have happened outside of a form, and I want to do a server action and get the state. So slightly different. That's forms. For the most part, that is all you will really need to know about forms when it comes to doing server actions, form stuff. And again, it's not specific to Next.js, but Next.js, has like a framework in how you use things, but that's mostly it. And just to get some more reps is let's
Button props. Ну-ка, давай. Button props. Нет. Button props. Label. String. О, порешали. А с этим что делать? Ладно. Погнали.
just go do the same thing for sign in. So it's mostly the same thing. It's literally just changing the word from sign up to sign in. It's just a duplicate. So I'm not going to walk through it. I'll just kind of paste it in there. But just to make sure our app works and our users can sign in, we want to do that. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go to the sign in form. I'm going to add my submit button here. I'm going to make a label. It's going to say sign in. Just like that. And then I'm going to import.
Мы это уже сделали. Sign in form. Нет, не сделали. Идем в код. Sign up form. Sign in form. Копию. Command A. Command V. И смотрим. Так, submit. Submit button. Не. Submit button from submit button. Use form state. Action, initial state и permalink. Вот что он. А нет, так это... Оно же optional. Тоже ругается. Добавили action, да, и тут еще не, все в порядке. Добавили submit button, да. А еще что сделали? Message добавили.
Import the sign in user. I think that's what I called it. Sign in. Maybe I didn't export it. Let me go check. Oh, we didn't make it yet. Oh, let's go make it. Cool. So if we go back to the actions auth file, let's make the one for sign in. So export sign in user. It's going to be the same thing. Previous state. Just going to any that form data. And that's going to be type form data. Nothing crazy. Why did I put that there? I don't know. I'm like trying to do something crazy. Here we go. All right. So we got that. Same thing. We want to validate the input because can't trust these users. Do that. And then we just want to try catch. And the only
Can't trust the clients.
difference with this one is the function that it
Запишем это. Don't trust the client.
calls in the try catch. So we won't call the sign up function. We'll call the sign in function from the same import from @utils auth tools. But everything else is the same. You set the cookie. We show you failed to, I guess we'll change the message to failed to sign you in. We should actually test this. So I want you to see the error message. So we'll do that too. So there we got that. Now I can import my sign in user like so. I can get my hook going, which is going to be use form state, pass in my sign in user like that, pass in my initial state, which is going to be the same as sign up. And then I'll have my form state here. And then I have my action here. And then on the form, action, action. And then as far as like, you know, showing some errors, I mean, there's no wrong way to do this, but I'll just do something like this. I'll say form state dot message. If that's there, I'm gonna do this just in case. If that's there, then just show this message right quick, which will just be form state dot message. I'm just going to show exactly what the server action return. I'll just do that. You can also like hook this up. You know, if you're worried about like accessibility, you can. This is where you can like take this message and feed it to like a screen reader or something like that. Okay, so let's try to sign in. I'm gonna just.
Can be found in the notes. Да, мы тут тусуемся.
Actually just break it and hopefully we can see that error. So let's go back to sign in. That renders. Give it a real email. Sorry about that. And then we can do that. And then boom, you can see right here, failed to sign you in. You might notice that the form didn't clear. Right? If that bothers you as much as it bothers me, then we're the same type of people. Yeah, there really is no easy way to do this. There is a way, and I didn't want to put it in here because it's a hack. The recommended way that I saw people do this on the server side is actually to pass a ref. Because once you pass a ref to the form, you can just do form.clear inside the server action, and that works. That works totally fine. But I didn't feel like writing. I didn't feel like doing this, where you gotta like do this, and then you pass in the ref, and then you make a ref, and then you add the ref. I didn't feel like doing that. So that's how you would do it. So once you pass in that form ref inside of this function, you would have, I don't know, maybe that's your third argument. I don't know wherever you pass it in, you could come down here and say, ref dot current, which would be the form, and all forms have a clear method on them. You could do that. And that's how you would clear it. But that's so much work. I'm not doing that. Also, I want them to do better. I want them to make a better one. So I refuse to do it that way. Like, make that better. I'm not using that. That's gross. And I know
That's gross. Peppermint pussy. I can't stand girls. I'm joining gross. Eating dog poo is gross. Get rid of Steamy from Kelvin and Hobbies. Какой-то локальный мем у них там.
I know that they don't want you to do that, or not that they don't want you to do it. I know that they haven't thought about it yet because there's nothing in their docs. I had to figure that out. I was like, oh, that's just how you do it. There's nothing in their docs talks about that. So I think this is one of those things where they're waiting. When I say they, I mean Next.js. They're waiting for the React team to do something about it. So they're just like, I don't know. We'll see what the React team does. I don't know. But that's how you would do it.
If you are dependent on a response from a server action that calls an external API to change the UI, how can that response be taken care of when it's being inserted directly into the action attribute of the form?
I'm guessing when they say taken care of, they actually want to get they want to get the result of that response and do something with it. Yes, that's a great question. In that example, you probably wouldn't use the action in the form. You would do what I'm going to show you later, which is to use like a transition where you can get the result of the data. But in the example that we do have, just to kind of fit it in, right now we're just returning a message, right? But like there's nothing stopping you from, if I go here, right now I can return whatever I want here, right? I can put the token here if I want, and it's there. So now on the form, if there is a form state.token, that's the result. So you can check for it there. We had a question about, can you take these exported server actions and unit test them? Yes, but with some caveats. Whenever you have this directive at the top of a file, not only is it expected to run a node, which is fine for any unit testing framework like Jest. Jest runs a node, it's great. But it's also expected that these functions are running on a request. That's why we're able to access things like the cookies, and we can do things like the headers. So with that being said, if you were to test these, you would most likely have to mock these out, because again, it's expected that these functions are running on some type of request, because that's really what a server action is. They only get called when they need to cross the threshold from a client to a server, which is basically a request. So you just need to mock those out. Whatever framework you want to use, just lets you mock out entire modules, things like that. You most likely just have to mock those out. So you can build an abstraction around this, do some dependency injection if you want, but for the most part, yeah, it's totally fine.
It's totally fine.
So,
Что, ребятки, давайте на этом все. Благодарочка за тусовку. Увидимся в следующей части. Пока-пока-пока.